Hi guys, my name is Juan Carlos and I am the LF lawyer and also have the pleasure of living in the LF apartment. And today I will be explaining to you the contents and the basics of the contract you're about to sign. So this is the first part of the contract. As you can see, you have the identification of LF. Then the parts highlighted in yellow are the ones that depend on your specific situation, your name, your surnames, your ID, etc., etc. And then which flat or which room you will be renting. These are the different parts highlighted in yellow and are the ones that change in your contract and the contract of the other clients. So this is the first clause of the contract. As you can see, this is a general contract. This means that it's a standard for all the LF clients, notwithstanding the fact that the specific situation of you with LF regarding which room you are renting and what is your lease is different, obviously, for obvious reasons for you than from the other clients. So this is the second clause of the contract, which establishes what is the object, what you're getting in other words, which is a room in one of the LF apartments with the purpose of temporarily staying in Barcelona, either because you're studying here or because you're working here. Within the next 2 days from the signing of the contract, you are free to go through the room and through the apartment, and in case that it does not match what you were told during the sales process, for instance because you were promised a private bathroom and there is not, or the room, the dimensions of it do not correspond with the dimensions you were told during the sales process, you can manifest this circumstance. Now the fourth clause of the contract is the duration of the contract. In your case, it depends on what you agree upon with Live Further. What you must take into account is that it is not renewed automatically. Once the expiration date arrives, the contract is terminated. So now clauses 5 of the contract regulate the possibility of withdrawing from the contract. That means if you don't want to stay with LF anymore for whatever reason, you don't have to invoke or justify any cause or any circumstance. If you say it, you communicate your willingness not to continue with 1 month in advance, then you're free to go. And LF can do the same with 2 months in advance to the expiration date. So now the next clause is the rent, which is how much you pay monthly for your room. This obviously depends. For you it will be a price which depends on the type of your room. What you need to take into account is that there is a €50 provision inside of your rent, inside of what you pay, which is destined to pay water, gas, electricity, etc. So in case that the consumption of you and your flatmates exceeds €50, the excess is distributed, is allocated evenly among all the flatmates, among you and the rest. So now the next clause regulates when you have to pay your rent. You have to pay your rent within the first 5 days of the month. This means that if you have to pay your rent for the month of February, you must pay it between the 1st and the 5th of February. Then this has one exception only, which is the first rent, your first payment. This one must be done within the next 48 hours of the date of signing of the contract, and you must also add your deposit to that payment. So in terms of rent payment, LF follows a 15-day policy. What does this mean? That if you enter into the LF apartment, into your room, within the first 15 days of the month, you have to pay the full month. But if you enter from the 16th day onward, you only have to pay half the month. Likewise, when you leave, the opposite rule applies, which means if you leave within the first 15 days of the month, you only have to pay half of the month. But if you leave from the 16th day onward, you have to pay the full rent. So now, what happens if you miss the date of payment, if you don't pay your rent in time? Well, LF, you must take into account that your rent has to be paid to the final owners of the estate, which is why it's important that you actually pay in time. What happens if you don't? There's a penalty of €10 per day in case that you don't pay within that term, and from the 5th day onward, it's a legal interest rate. So now your deposit, which we talked about before. What is the deposit for? The deposit is to guarantee the compliance of the obligations that the contract establishes, which are payment of the rent, conservation of the room, conservation of the apartment, etc., etc. The amount is the same as the lease. So if you pay 350 or 500 or 550 euros, the amount of your deposit is exactly the same as the amount of your rent. And the way that it is applied is with a communication, which would be sent from LF in case that it is necessary to apply the payment of any amount to your deposit. So next is, when does LF give you back your deposit? LF will give you back or reimburse your deposit within the next month, maximum 1 month after the expiration date of the contract. This, guys, is because the bills regarding your room or the apartment come once a month. They don't always come on the same dates, so there must be some time in between so that LF can manage the deposit. So now the next clause regulates something that might be especially interesting for you. What happens if when you arrive in the flat, you're not feeling as comfortable as you expected, or for whatever reason you want to try a new experience, try living with some other people of a different age range, which are working or studying, etc., etc. LF has a very wide variety of rooms, in dozens and dozens of rooms actually, in different locations of Barcelona. So if you want to change, if you want something different for whatever reason, LF will do its best to try to relocate you insofar as there is a room available for you. So the next clause regulates access of LF to the apartment. LF can access the apartment from Monday to Friday during Labor Days from 9 to 6 without any prior communication. In case LF has to accede to your room for whatever reason, there must be, and you will receive a communication 24 hours prior to the access, unless there is a situation of emergency, which requires LF to help you out or to go to your room for whatever reason, or that you file a ticket through the SOS platform, which means that you are requesting help for whatever reason, so LF must access your room in order to help you out. The next clause of the contract regulates what the obligations of LF are. What will LF do for you during your stay in Barcelona and during the term of your lease? The first thing is that there will be 1 monthly cleaning of the common areas of the flat. The second thing that you must take into account is that if you have any problem in the flat, whether that be a problem with your heating system, with your air conditioned, or some problem with the kitchen or with your shower, to put an example, you can file a ticket within the SOS system, which we will talk about in a few moments. Even though there is a maximum term for LF to answer, which is a 3-day period, the average time in which LF will answer your inquiries is of only 14 hours, and the term for solving these problems is under 3 days in the present moment. In addition, if there is any problem with your flat, as previously said, shower, kitchen, heating system, whatever, LF will send a specialist to the flat in order to fix it within a reasonable period of time. So when can LF attend whatever problem you have? LF has this phone number and this email in which you will be attended from 10 to 6. In case you have a problem with the internet, in order for LF to be able to help you out, you should send an email or call to this number or this email as a condition prior for LF to be able to help you. So now, according to the next clause, if there is a serious incident, something significant happens, like the electrical system is down or there is a water leak or something of this nature, you can call this person on the number that you will see on screen at whatever time. This does not mean that it's a 24-hour service. LF will do the best to assist you as soon as possible, but you might have to be a little patient if you call this number for something of this nature. Notwithstanding that, you also have the public and municipal services, police, firefighters, etc., which you would have to call this number, 112. And in case that what happens is not urgent, is not something that requires an immediate assistance by LF, LF would appreciate that you would send or file your request through the SOS system, and here you will find the link for that. So now on to the next clause. What happens if you definitely lost your keys? In this case, LF within a reasonable period of time will give you a new copy of them, but take into account that if you actually lost them, it's pretty probable that all the locks of either the apartment or of your room will have to be changed for your own safety and the safety of the flatmates. So this will obviously have some costs which you would have to put front with, either with a payment or with a deposit. So now on to the next clause, which is contract termination. These are regulated the causes based on which LF could terminate the contract. In general, they are serious and relevant breaches of the different contract clauses which we have spoken about in the recent minutes. Some of them are lack of payment of two or more monthly rents. As we commented before, LF has to give these payments to the final owners of the estate, of the apartments. So in case there is a significant delay or lack of payment of these amounts, LF has to put front with it, and this is why this is such a serious clause for obvious reasons. In case that there is a total 20-day delay in the payment of the rent, whether it affects the same amount, the same monthly rent, or the days are consecutive or not, this is also a cause of termination of the contract, and you will also see the rest of the different causes of termination which are regulated. In case this happens, which I hope it doesn't, LF would send you a communication, an email, stating the different causes, and you would have to leave the apartment within a 10-day term. So you can also terminate the contract in case that LF breaches any of its obligations. It obviously has to be, like in your case, a significant breach of the contract. For instance, there are some specific situations which are regulated in the contract, missing 3 consecutive periods of cleaning of the common areas, or there being a delay superior to 6 labor days in answering one of your SOS tickets, for example. So now the next one is with the house rules. LF establishes certain rules which everyone must comply with. We do this in order to enhance your experience the most as possible and to protect you and the other flatmates. There are different rules which are regulated, from the most serious ones to the lesser transgressions. The more serious ones you can imagine, which are vandalic acts, robberies, discrimination, which LF takes very seriously, whether that be because of gender, because of race, because of sexual orientation, etc., etc. These are very serious transgressions, and their commission implies immediate termination of the contract. Then there are the less serious ones, which are, for example, if you are leaving your things in the common areas and disturbing the peace of your flatmates systematically. This is also a breach of the house rules, even though it's not as serious as the ones we said before. And based on the seriousness of the rule, if you accumulate enough number, contract could be terminated. So now the next clause, what happens if there is a breach of the house rules? In this case, LF will act as a mediator to try to solve whatever conflict happens within the flat, within your stay in Barcelona. In this case, LF encourages you to try to solve it between flatmates in case of minor transgressions, for obvious reasons. In case, for whatever reason, you are not able to solve whatever problems you have amongst the different flatmates, there is a mediation system in which LF will try to help you out. It is very important that in case this happens, you come forth with whatever situation has arisen, and especially that you try to bring evidence of whatever happened, because LF cannot impose or terminate someone's contract without evidence of an important transgression. For obvious reasons, if there is a very serious transgression, such as vandalic acts, robberies, or a case of discrimination for whatever reason, you're obviously not required to try to solve it between flatmates. In this case, LF would appreciate if you would immediately inform the company so they can take the appropriate measures as soon as possible. Once the contract is terminated for whatever reason, you must give back the room and the apartment in the same conditions as it was when it was given to you. In case there is anything that is different because something has been broken or there's cleaning to be done, this will be allocated to the deposit. So now, next clauses regulate what you get with the flat in terms of furnishment. The flat and your room is furnished with certain items which are listed here, such as pans and different objects which you may use, and they are all listed here. So now this next clause regulates what happens if something in the flat doesn't work, such as the washing machine or any other item. In this case, you should refer to this clause, which specifically regulates what happens based on the different circumstances regarding the item. LF will do the necessary reparations to keep the flat and your apartment in the necessary conditions, in the fundamental proper conditions for you to live there, without, for this reason, elevating the price of the rent. If the reparations to be made in the flat were significant enough, and insofar as you would not be able to live there normally, you would have the faculty, which we talked about before, of withdrawing from the contract and the terms established in it. So this is the explanation of the contract. We tried to encompass in this video the more fundamental aspects of it from like a practical approach, taking into account the things which you might find the most relevant when starting your LF experience. This doesn't mean that we covered every single aspect of the contract, though this video would be way too long and we would occupy way too much of your time. So for this reason, we encourage you to thoroughly read it on your own before signing it and asking any questions or inquiries that you might have. And for this purpose and during your stay in Barcelona, we also encourage you to thoroughly read any legal document you sign. During the term of your lease, LF cannot raise the rent. Let's say, for instance, that you signed a contract from January to July. During this period, LF would not be able and would not raise your rent. But for instance, if your contract terminates and there has been a significant raise in the market prices in the city, or there is significant inflation, or for example, LF has done important improvements in the flat which raise their value, LF could propose the corresponding raise in the price of the rent, which you could accept or not for the next period of rent. So the contracts, as we've explained before, they are not automatically renewed. Once the expiration date arrives, the contract is terminated. Taking this into account, 2 months prior to the expiration date, and since there is not an automatic renewal of the contract, the room is published in the LF website, taking into consideration that there is no reasonable expectation for renewal. What does this mean? If you're happy and if you want to stay in the same flat in the same room and book it, we encourage you to communicate this to LF prior to the 2 months before the expiration date of the contract. This does not mean that if you say it in another moment after this, that you cannot still book the flat, because it's possible that it's published in the web, but that no one has booked it yet. So for this reason, we encourage you that if you are happy with your stay in Barcelona and specifically with your conditions in the room, in the flat, you tell LF as soon as possible so they can book the room for you. In general, the purpose of LF and of your experience here is that the small transgressions are managed within the flatmates. LF does not purport to be some sort of police state or to prosecute every single transgression that happens. Obviously, leaving aside the ones which are especially relevant, such as we commented before, racism, vandalism, violence of any kind, these are the things in which LF would immediately step in. Everything that goes beyond these serious and big transgressions, the idea is that they are managed internally with the flatmates, and in case there is any difficulty, LF can mediate between you guys. No, not at all. You do not have to look for your own flatmates. LF has an intelligent matching process throughout which they will try to put you in the flat with people who are within your age range and age of interest and situation in the city, so you have the best experience possible in Barcelona. Yeah, LF organizes a series of events in order for you to be able to meet not only your flatmates but other people beyond the LF experience, such as surfing dinners, which are a really cool event, which I encourage you to participate and engage in. They are dinners which are organized by different flats, in which every different course is taken in a different flat with different hosts, and this is a great way to meet people, to mingle and to have a lot of fun. There are also the classic pub crawls. There are events in a pretty famous bar in the city which is called the Limehouse, which have become a pretty trendy thing in the LF experience, and the classic things you can imagine like beer pong tournaments and things of this nature.